Glad to welcome everyone to the first, which is also the open session of the Strategic Session and Strategic Planning course. This is the first session where we talk about what it is in general. Today we're going to discuss why a company needs this in the first place and how it's conducted. And I'll say I think many of you saw the announcements on Monday. I've also invited Andrei Pivovarov. He's an expert in conducting strategic sessions, who will explain the practical side of running a session specifically. Well, today we're talking about how companies do this. Why would you need it? Why do you need to understand strategic planning and learn about strategic sessions? Why do you need to understand strategic planning and learn about strategic sessions? The thing is, there are different levels of HR professionals. There are operational level HRs who simply know how to build and maintain processes. And there are strategic level HRs who help the company implement its strategy. These strategic level HRs eventually reach positions like Chief Human Resources Officer or VP of HR, and they are very highly paid. If you're thinking about the pinnacle of your HR career and aiming for that high point, then understanding strategic issues is absolutely essential. The benefit for a company of you understanding strategy is that you'll be able to help that company operate effectively at a strategic level. Our course website is available at this address. Our course website is available at this address. Very simple, very easy to remember. Very simple, very easy to remember. And the course program consists of 6 sessions. Over 6 sessions, we go through all the stages of developing a company's strategy and strategic planning. One of the sessions will be dedicated to conducting a strategic session. That is how it's carried out. This will be session number 4. Today's session will focus on the following questions. We'll talk about what a company's strategic plan is, how it differs from operational planning that many companies do annually when setting goals for the year. We'll break down a 5-step plan for developing a strategic plan and explore a strategic planning model. That's our lesson plan for today. In case we haven't met, my name is Mike Pritula. Here are the companies I've worked for. These are Alpha Bank, Starlight Media, Wargaming, Preply Ideals, and now I'm developing an academy and collaborating with PeopleForce. The work relies on international best practices. Here's a list of practitioners I regularly follow, and likewise I'd be grateful if you could write about yourself, your city, position, and company. This way we'll get to know each other and it'll be clear who's attending today's session. So please don't be shy, write 3 simple things in the chat. City, position, company. I'll read it all out, and this way you'll also introduce yourselves to some extent, not just me introducing myself. I'm waiting. Those watching on Facebook can also post in the comments there. Other people will read it and learn about you too. Friends will add you. So Moscow, SEO Super Team Lab. Thank you, Ekaterina. Who else is ready to introduce themselves? Minsk and Generalistin, or probably Games. I'm not sure how to pronounce it correctly. And it's probably like this. Okay, all right. Who else is ready? Go ahead and write. While you're writing, I'll move on. As soon as someone writes, I'll pause and read it. So those who are the second option, I've already forgotten what the first one was, probably Aeon. Well, it doesn't matter. Those who are already in the course will have homework assignments where you can apply everything you've learned in practice. I'll check them and give feedback. In short, we'll go through the entire process of developing a strategic plan for your company. So Olga also wrote Adidas company, Kiev HRM. Cool. Thank you, Olga. I will start with a quote from Benjamin Franklin. I think for many, it is a famous face that many dream of seeing as often as possible. Bashkortostan. Got it. Thank you, Olga. So Benjamin Franklin said this phrase, failing to plan is planning to fail. What did he mean by that? He meant that a company that fails to plan its development is automatically planning its failure. That is, you cannot ignore development planning because then failure is inevitable. So we also have Maria from Yekaterinburg and Olga from Kiev currently on maternity leave. Cool. So strategic planning is indeed very important. At the same time, strategic planning is not something that only applies to huge megacorporations. Strategic planning is required for every company, from the average corner store to the biggest bank, corporation, manufacturer, or anyone else. At the same time, strategic planning itself is not super complex. It is not, as Americans say, rocket science. How to translate it correctly? That is, in principle, knowing how strategic planning is done and having a set of tools, any company can develop a strategic plan for itself. It can be done by anyone. Yes, a company can hire a strategic planning consultant to help. They will bring tools and share their experience. But even a company that cannot afford to bring in a consultant can still develop its own strategic plan. So what is strategic planning that we are talking about today? It is a type of work, very focused and disciplined, during which a company's strategy is developed, which then leads to certain actions for the company to shape what it wants to accomplish based on where it is now. So strategic planning is, you could say, the work of developing a strategy. Developing a strategy is not a one-time exercise. It is not like everyone just sits down, fills out a table, and boom, you have a strategy. Developing a strategy requires specific actions. These actions that accompany strategy development are called strategic planning. Let us move on. It's not just a document. You can't say that filling out paperwork is strategic planning. It's actually many things at once. It's a set of concepts that we study in this course, procedures that we also study, methods of action that can help a company become more successful in defining and achieving its mission, vision, and guiding principles in order to create a solid foundation for increasing its value, increasing its worth, and so on. So on one hand, strategy is simple, but on the other hand, it's only simple when you know what needs to be done. For companies that don't know what to do or what leads to strategy development, strategic planning is certainly difficult. But once all the tools are clear and available, it's simply a matter of technique. We can say that a good strategy is created almost automatically after that. Next, what is a strategic plan? It's a document that serves as an official roadmap describing how an organization will implement a well-thought-out strategy, that is, where the organization positions itself for the next few years and how it will get there. This is called a strategic plan. And it's important to understand that in a strategic plan, the most crucial part is precisely this plan, the roadmap. Not just what the company wants to achieve, but how it will get there. And the success or failure of the company depends on how this strategic plan is formulated, and probably more difficult to do. So strategic planning, if we look at it very broadly, strategic planning has only 3 steps that a company must go through. One of these steps, now you'll try to guess, one of these 3 steps is done during the strategy session. So 3 steps. The first step is the current state, understanding where the company is now, that is the baseline. The second step is the future state, describing where we want to be. And the third step is shaping how we will get there, how we will move from the current state to the future state. Which step do you think is mainly addressed in the strategy session? First, second, or third? Please write the number in the chat. That is, are we discussing the current state, the future state, or how we will get there? Let me remind you, or not remind you, if someone is encountering the concept of a strategy session for the first time. It is an event, a meeting of top management, where top management works on the strategic plan. Now, to my great joy, it is becoming increasingly popular. So yes, some high-level aspects of step 3 may be touched on, but step 3 is more like homework for the entire company afterwards. Let us move on. Step number 3 is the most important here. And for some reason, this is the step that companies most often skip. Companies like to analyze the present a bit, dream about the future, and then rush off. And then they sit around wondering why their strategy isn't working. Step number 3 actually includes certain concepts, procedures, methodologies, tools, techniques, and actions that the company will undertake in order to actually get where it wants to go. While the course is largely focused on what methodologies, processes, procedures, and tools are needed here to make everything as effective as possible. Because just developing a high-level strategic plan on its own is fairly easy. Many companies can handle that, but detailing the strategy down to specific actions is a bit more challenging. What's the essence of this 3-step mechanism? The first step is essentially analysis. The second step is planning, and the third step is implementation and execution. Exactly, and in fact, all 3 steps are about finding deep answers to deep questions. Who are we as a company now? Where are we headed? And how do we plan to get there? These answers then turn into a large number of more detailed answers. And the next question I want to ask you is, does your company currently have a strategy? If yes, give a plus sign. If your company doesn't have a strategy, give a minus sign. I look forward to your responses. I'm curious how many of our participants work in companies that have a strategy, and how many work in companies without one. Okay, I see 1 plus, another plus. That's good to see. A special note about HR, since we have many HR professionals participating, having a strategy is very important for HR. This is crucial because HR largely defines its work by developing an HR strategy, but it's difficult to develop an HR strategy without a company strategy, because the main purpose of an HR strategy is to support the company strategy. That is, to help the company achieve its goals. But if a company doesn't have a goal, doesn't understand where it's going, it's hard for HR to operate at a strategic level. At most, they end up just responding to current requests, and anything done for the future or growth isn't really valued, because the company doesn't have that future orientation. Here in the chat and on Facebook and Zoom, I mostly see pluses. So the rest apparently decided not to write minus because when I ask in other courses who has strategies and who doesn't, the fourth option is to buy a book. Well, most likely several books. That's it. I said 4 options or a fifth option. And the fifth option is to hire a big consulting firm like McKinsey. A lot of people will come in, work very hard, and deliver a strategy, but it will cost more, and it's not guaranteed to be the best. Let's move on. Interestingly, strategic planning is often depicted as a bridge, and it actually resembles a brain. Because we have a left bank, or let's not make associations, because some people have associations with the left bank, right bank, who live in Kyiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and other cities. On rivers, they have their own associations. Let's skip left and right. Just shore number 1 is the current situation. That's where the company is now. Shore number 2 is the desired situation. That's where the company wants to be. And the bridge is actually how the company will get there. I believe they say that Henry Mintzberg was one of the first to present this bridge idea from a business perspective. Although, for example, in Tong coaching, the bridge model is also very often used as a way for a person to achieve some goals. Let's move on. It is important to realize that strategic planning is a team effort. That is, it is not a document that the CEO creates. Or worst of all, the worst approach a company can take is to hire a chief strategy officer and say, I'm going to strategize for us. He developed it, brought it in, and then either fire him, I don't know, keep him, or do something else. No, that's not how strategies are developed. Any strategy that is developed is a team effort. That's where the asking and answering of questions takes place. There are a lot of conversations going on there between the dedicated and team members. That's what's so important. The people who are involved in strategic planning, we're going to talk about this in the course, they're not just positions. You can't say we have to take people from such and such positions. Because there may be people in those positions who are not committed, and there may conversely be people in the company who are committed, but there may be a position of a little out of step. Interestingly, Andrei Pivovarov, who will be addressing on Monday, he cites cases like this, which is pretty common. During strategic planning, the company says goodbye to someone on the team because it sees everything hidden become revealed. The person has some personal interests, his personal ambitions. The team defiantly does not want to work with him, or he behaves like the last strike. And a good counselor, he's at this time recommending to the CEO of the lecturers, get this person out of this planning because he's in the way. Well, it often leads to not only eliminating the person from the strategy session, but it's fleshed out to the point of termination. Accordingly, team members, strategic planning, and key stakeholders in your organization. It could actually be shareholders as well, but they should have a role, meaning they shouldn't be dragging the case on themselves and influencing everything. Is that how it happens? Let's move on. Why is this necessary? No one has put a minus, but if someone had put a minus and said, we don't have a strategy in our company, we could have written, we don't need one, for example, right? Because there are companies that are convinced, deeply convinced that they don't need a strategy, they are doing quite well as it is, and they are surviving quite well as it is. So that's what strategy is for. Strategy is essentially about adapting to the future. And the future, as we already see and we know, and this year it was confirmed once again, is very unpredictable. Who on January 1st, okay, except for the richest people in the world, who knew about these lockdowns as they are in Russian quarantines, about the fact that many offline businesses would be at risk? Few people knew about it on January 1st. But someone who gets a lot of insider information, he probably knew a lot of things. But there are only a handful of people like that. And companies that never think about the future and never plan to adapt to it, they end up sooner or later, like Kodak, for example. The Kodak company, it was quite a successful company. How all of a sudden, abruptly, its stock collapsed, and that's where Kodak is today. I don't know, it's been a long time since I last heard on them. Although at one time it was a huge market leader, there were tons of cameras, films, Kodaks, they had the most wonderful life. But they had competitors, Fuji, for example, but it was still great. But they missed a very simple thing. They missed out on the technological revolution of developing technologies like digital cameras, and unfortunately, their business was jeopardized. Therefore, there are many such companies. For example, during the quarantine, the well-known rental company Machine 6 also filed for bankruptcy. And then, in my opinion, the Chinese bought it, but still, the fact remains. Company of many decades of multi-decade long history, global super powerful brand, and then bam, he declares bankruptcy. Circus Dudley is the same. Instantly filed for bankruptcy. The state supported it, its investors supported it, but nevertheless they were not ready for all this. Therefore, companies like Kodak failed to adapt and failed. I also want to say about the future, these are the kind of crises that are taking place this year. I like that phrase I heard from a historian. It's been one of my favorite crisis phrases ever since. You know, they say, I don't like the phrase that a crisis is an opportunity. No, a crisis is an impossibility. A crisis is a terrible thing. But what do I like about the crisis? A crisis is a leap in reality. That is, when the world has a shake-up like this year, for example, it means that the whole world is forced to jump into reality. Many companies, many people, many organizations, processes existed in the old world. They were unprepared for reality. And the crisis, the whole world sweated and everyone jumped into reality. Who was willing to go online or was online and everything is great? Those who weren't ready didn't make it. Therefore, organizations must be able to anticipate change rather than adapt on the basis of fact. But sometimes there's no time to adjust. As we saw in spring, when total quarantine was announced, companies had no chance to adapt. They only had a week. Restaurants, movie theaters, those were hit the hardest. That's why a strategy is needed. Without a strategy, there will be no future. Let's move on. Who benefits from strategy? The good news is that it's not just good for the business owner. Of course, the business owner benefits most of all. For them, it's a way to preserve their business, but customers benefit too. For example, as a customer of a restaurant, when it closed, I couldn't be their customer anymore. Consequently, I was disappointed. But if the restaurant could keep operating, take McDonald's for instance, during quarantine, they were able to continue working. As a customer, I was very happy that when all restaurants were closed, I could at least drive up to McDonald's, to that window, pick up my order, eat in the car, or take it home. And of course, employees who keep their jobs during quarantine or crisis, they certainly benefit from this as well. And we know that many employees were laid off or continue to be laid off because companies weren't prepared for a situation like we're in now. Let's move on. What are the benefits of strategic planning? Yes, in fact, there are many different benefits. It's an opportunity to improve efficiency. Finally, addressing things companies often put off. Increase performance, improve understanding of the organizational environment, improve decision-making quality, expand organizational capabilities, improve communication effectiveness and public relations, increase political and public consumer support, increase the organization's significance and employee growth, improve organizational culture, and increase adaptability to environmental changes. But that's not even a complete list of the benefits of strategic planning. Here's another good quote. It's often quoted now. I've seen this quote for the second time in the last month or so. Whoever controls the past controls the future. Whoever controls the present controls the past. Strategic planning is exactly what allows a company to control its future. By analyzing the past and influencing the present, that's why it's important. What else? Strategic planning provides protection against failure. Those who develop a strategic plan will always be prepared. Those who don't will always be surprised. Many companies were prepared for quarantine and survived. Like McDonald's, they're actually doing quite well. Many companies were unprepared for this and were very surprised. And then they asked for government support. So it's better not to be the one who's constantly surprised, not to be like an ostrich, not to bury your head in the sand and ignore the need for strategy. Next, it's important to understand that a strategy is not a huge 500-page document, as was once customary. About 20 years ago, strategy development exercises were really like scientific research. Consultants were hired. The consultants worked very, very hard. Even developing a strategy could take a year or several years. And then they'd bring in the strategy, pages and pages of it, tons of stuff, and companies would then rack their brains trying to figure out what to do with it. Then they'd buy implementation support services from consultants, strategy follow-ups, and so on. Nowadays, this doesn't work. It shouldn't be like that. Today, a strategy should be like a map that allows everyone to navigate the future. Now, terms like one-pager are very popular. That is, a one-page, two-page strategy, maybe 3 pages at most. Because the point of strategy isn't to come up with something very complicated, confusing, boring, or uninteresting, but to create something that can be given to any employee. Oh, cool, I get it. Oh, I can do this. You can do a test on an employee like this? Does the employee understand what they need to do at work when they read the company's strategy? If they understand, great, the strategy is good. If they don't, it's bad. And if an employee doesn't know the strategy at all, that's terrible. So my next question to you is, do all your employees know the company strategy? Has the company communicated this strategy, sent it out by email, held a meeting, regularly conveys it somehow? Put a plus if all employees know, a minus if not all employees know. I see the first plus. That's cool. That's great. Yes, that's great too. This is also a modern approach because previously strategy was strictly confidential, you know. Sometimes even no one except the CEO knew. He would peek at it to see exactly what needed to be done. And even the top team might not have known. Now everything has changed. Now everyone knows the strategy because everyone has to work on implementing it. Great. Next, for a strategy not to be detached from practice, it must of course be accompanied by tactical plans. There's a quote from Sun Tzu. I think it's also very popular. You might have heard it too. Strategy without tactics is the slowest path to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So strategy is very important, better than no strategy, and strategy with tactics is even better. Therefore, strategic planning is about doing the right things, while tactical planning is about doing things right. Both are important. Strategic planning focuses on what you do, tactical planning on how you do it, and one is impossible without the other. Companies usually engage in tactical or operational planning. It's short-term and doesn't see the future. And if you believe Sunji, it's much more effective. It's better to focus on strategy and maybe skip operational planning somewhere than to only do operational planning and never do strategic planning. Best of all, of course, is to do both. Therefore, there are 3 levels of work with strategy: strategic, which creates policies; operational, which sets goals; and tactical. It's the development of an action plan. There are companies that get stuck on just one level, either the top or bottom or only the middle. For a strategy to work fully, for a company to improve and move forward, you need all 3. The strategic level, the operational level, and the tactical level, that's when the strategy will be realized. So what are the realities? According to research by experts in this field, about 95% of typical workers don't understand organizational strategies. Fortunately, we found that participants in today's webinar have a different situation. That's really good to hear. Nearly 90% of all organizations fail to execute their strategy. Often because they get stuck here and ignore this. Approximately 86% of executive and top teams spend less than an hour a week discussing strategy or none at all. And about 60% of executive teams don't link strategy to budgeting. That is, the strategy lives separately and the budget separately. That's the problem. Therefore, a strategic plan prepared during strategic planning is a document that examines the organization's mission, policy, plan for achieving goals, defines the company's scope of activities, and articulates the organization's value. That is what contribution we make to society. It provides answers to questions such as, where are we now? Where do we want to go in the future? How do we get there? These are the 3 most important questions. Then, how much will it cost? That is linking budget to strategy. When will we get there and who is responsible for getting us there? These are the kinds of questions it answers. What does such a plan consist of? It's a vision of the future, or simply a vision mission, a list of strategic relationships, an organizational assessment, strategies that the organization plans to achieve, that is, long-term goals and objectives, a list of strategic perspectives, and a communications plan. Next, a 5-step plan or 5-step model is used to develop a strategic plan. Something that allows us to perform a set of actions from start to finish, so that we end up with a plan we can then implement. This is ultimately done in a way that allows all actions to be planned considering all interconnections. Because an organization is not a program where you can load any strategy and it will execute it. An organization is still about people, it's about being in a changing world, it's also about competitors who aren't sleeping either. So it's important to do it in a way that's grounded in reality and what will happen as the plan is implemented. What does this 5-step process look like? Developing a strategic plan? Step number 1, we define the starting point. Here, I think many people know tools like developing a vision, mission, SWOT analysis, environmental scanning. Many have probably heard of PESTLE analysis and gap analysis. Step number 2 is shaping the horizon. That is where we aspire to go. Olga wrote a great phrase, organization is a living organism. Exactly. Step number 3 is action formation. That is developing an implementation plan, training, and developing a strategic plan. Step number 4 is direct implementation. That is communicating the strategy and implementing the action plan. And step number 5, which is very important, is measurement and support. Very often companies fail in strategy because they don't start measuring in a timely manner how we implement this strategy. That is, they don't realize whether they are succeeding or failing. And the strategy turns out to be, a perfect dream, an ideal dream. We dreamed it, we planned it, but it remained a dream. Accordingly, in more detail. In establishing a starting point, this is something that often happens before a strategy session. I mean, it's rare that it's brought to a strategy session, it's preparation. Active assessment of the internal and external environment to ensure that everyone clearly understands where the company is now, its strengths and weaknesses, its environment, its problems, resources, opportunities, threats, and so on. The second point is to define the horizon. This is what most often takes up the strategy session. This is the most creative stage, the one that requires brainstorming interactions, where an understanding of the vision is born based on where the company is now. This is also where goals and objectives are developed and priorities are set. That is not just goals, but objectives. These goals and objectives then serve as a guideline. Step number 3 is to formulate actions. That is, describing the plan, which is then approved by management, distributed throughout the organization, and a project plan for the goals is created. Top level, this can be created in a strategy session, but further details still require employee involvement and working out the details. That is, the company should eventually have a set of project plans born as internal projects that are then implemented. And of course, people will be working around these projects. And very often these can be people from different departments. That is, such cross-functional teams. That's why strategies fail, because companies don't structure these projects and organize people around them. Simply cascading goals from the strategy level down to regular employees is not enough. It doesn't ensure strategy implementation without developing a project plan. The fourth point is implementing changes. It allows all the plans that were made to be realized. This includes allocating budget, providing resources, developing performance metrics, and working with them. And step number 5 is measurement and support. That is continuous measurement and ongoing support. At this stage, many companies implement dashboards, or as they're called in Russian, control panels, Power BI, Google Data Studio or scorecards, or some other tool where they display metrics important for the strategy, start tracking them and responding to them. Responding is the key word here because metrics themselves are useless if you just sit and look at them. So here's our 5-step approach to developing a strategic plan, summarized on one slide. It looks like this. Accordingly, starting with the next lesson, we will go through all 5 stages. Today we got an overview of what strategic planning is and learned about strategic sessions. Next, with the course students in a closed group, we will go through all 5 stages. We will study all the tools, practice using them, get feedback, analyze some of your situations, and ultimately be ready to develop this in a company. One tool to make today's lesson practical as well, I will show you today. This tool is called SWOT analysis. This can be considered an essential tool for developing any strategy. It is the most popular tool in the world. It is regularly used nearly 1 million times every day. It is taught in absolutely any course, training, school, program, university, and so on. So we can take a poll, give a thumbs up if you have filled out a SWOT analysis this year. If you have had to do this, give a thumbs up. It does not matter if it was for a company, department, or product. Anything, function. So I see 1 thumbs up, another thumbs up. 3 plus 4 thumbs up. What is great about SWOT analysis? First of all, SWOT analysis. Oh, for yourself too, Olga, thank you. Yes, people even use it for personal purposes to fill out for themselves. What is great about SWOT analysis? First, SWOT analysis looks at both internal and external factors. That is, what is happening inside the company and what is happening outside the company. Internally, as part of filling out the analysis, the company's strengths are examined. These are opportunities, resources, talents, know-how, and so on, and weaknesses. These are problems, lack of resources, issues with people and processes, and so on. These are internal factors, meaning things that happen exclusively within the company, and external factors are what's not happening inside, but what's happening outside. They are also divided into positives and negatives. The positive is opportunities. These are all the good things that are either happening now or could happen, through which the company can somehow improve to achieve its goals. So these are favorable situations for the company, and threats are conversely unfavorable situations. It's important to understand that opportunities and threats are unique to each company. For example, quarantine is a threat for some companies. For movie theaters, for instance, it's a threat. People simply don't go to the cinema. But for Netflix, it's an opportunity. People stay at home, they want to watch new releases, they buy a Netflix subscription and sit watching new releases on Netflix. So what's good for one may be bad for another. That's the SWOT analysis. Today we'll just discuss it as a tool, how it fits into our whole process. We'll talk about that in the next lesson. The homework for those in the course is to complete a SWOT analysis for their company. For now, we've covered the basics. Next, we'll talk about how to prepare for a strategic session and planning, how to assemble a team, how to prepare the company, what tools are needed, what letters to send out. Then we'll define the starting point, endpoints, turn strategy into action, and implement changes. Books that can be recommended on the topic of strategy. There are excellent books in Russian. The first is a book by Richard Rumelt. It's so great that at Wargaming we even decided to give it to all the executives in 3 offices. We ordered a private edition from Mann, Ivanov, and Ferber publishers, 500 copies with a custom cover, and distributed them to all managers. And Wargaming largely developed its strategy based on the principles from this book. It was written by a Stanford professor who collaborated with another professor who helped develop strategy. And the second book is a classic. It's been around for a while, Blue Ocean Strategy. Though it probably came out over a decade ago, it's still relevant today. Many companies still dream and talk about blue oceans, how to get there, what it takes, and so on. This concludes our lesson for today. Thank you to everyone who was online. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to take the course. I think it's useful. I took it once and I've been applying it in different companies ever since. I'd also appreciate if you could share what you found most valuable today and what you're taking away from this session. If you're watching on Facebook, feel free to like or share the post. For those watching on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. New webinars are constantly being added, so subscribe to be the first to know about them. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We still have a little time left, and I'm ready to answer any remaining questions you might have. If there are no questions, well, anyone with questions or feedback, please write them down. To everyone else, I want to wish you a great weekend and a fantastic end to your Friday. Get some good rest, recharge, and start work on Monday with renewed energy. It seems there won't be any questions or feedback from him. In that case, let's end on this positive note. Once again, thank you to everyone who spent their Friday evening online for self-improvement. You're fantastic, friends. I'm proud of you and look forward to meeting you at other open webinars. Thank you and have a great weekend. You're welcome, friends. Until next time, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you for your participation as well.